The cold air of the Seattle courthouse bit into my cheeks as I stepped through the tall glass doors. My hands trembled around the stack of legal papers. My heart thumped, thud, 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 like a drum echoing in a tunnel. Inside, the marble floor glistened under white lights. People whispered, their eyes sliding toward me. My husband, Mark, sat at the defense table, his uniform crisp, his jaw tight. Beside him, Officer Kelly, the woman who had destroyed my marriage, leaned back in her chair, smirking. My palms were sweaty. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. A low sound escaped my throat, half anger, half grief. Today was the day they would pay. Today was the day I took my life back. My name is Rachel Carter. Until last year, my life in Tacoma, Washington felt like a quiet dream. I taught 4th grade at a local elementary school. Mark, my husband, worked as a police sergeant. We lived in a small blue house with white trim and a porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. Every evening, I would sit on that swing with a mug of tea while Mark pulled into the driveway, his patrol car shining under the streetlights. He would smile, his brown eyes soft, his shoulders slumping with relief. I'd wave, and our dog Buddy would race to him, tail wagging so hard it blurred. At night, we cooked simple dinners together: pasta, grilled chicken, sometimes pancakes if I was too tired to plan. Mark would joke about my teacher voice when I told him to wash his hands. He'd chuckle, wrap his arms around me from behind, and kiss my neck. I thought those moments meant something real. When he slipped his wedding ring off to scrub the counters, he would put it right back on, tapping it once, as if to say, "I'm still yours." On weekends, we drove to the coast. The smell of salt and wet sand filled the car. Mark always brought his camera, taking photos of me against the gray waves. "For our future kids," he'd say. I would blush and tuck my hair behind my ears. We had plans: a bigger house, maybe 2 children, maybe a golden retriever to keep Buddy company. Our friends called us the steady couple, and I wore that nickname like a medal, but even then little cracks showed. Sometimes Mark came home later and later. He said paperwork piled up. Sometimes he kept his phone face down on the table. I'd catch his smile flicker when a message popped up. My stomach would tighten. "Who's that?" I'd ask lightly. "Just work," he'd say without looking at me. He'd rub the back of his neck, eyes darting away. I told myself it was stress. Police work is hard. He needs space. One Friday evening, I prepared his favorite, lasagna, and waited. The clock ticked past 8, then 9. Buddy whined at the door. I called Mark, no answer. My thumb hovered over the screen. My heart beat faster. When he finally walked in at nearly midnight, his hair messy, his uniform smelling of perfume that wasn't mine, I smiled too brightly. "Long day?" I asked. My voice cracked. He kissed my forehead, muttered "yeah," and disappeared into the shower. Steam rose under the door. My chest ached. My hands shook over the sink as I scrubbed dishes that were already clean. The next morning, Mark made pancakes. He whistled, flipping them with a flourish. "What's wrong, babe?" he asked. His tone was light, but his eyes flicked up at me like a warning. I forced a laugh. "Nothing," I said. "Just tired." He reached out, squeezed my shoulder, then let go too quickly. Buddy barked, tail wagging nervously. That small scene, pancakes, whistling, my fake smile, burned itself into my memory. It was the last weekend I believed our marriage was safe. Our friends noticed. At a barbecue, my best friend Laura leaned close. "You okay? You seem off." I smiled too wide. "Just busy," I said. Laura's eyebrows drew together. She squeezed my hand under the table. Mark was across the yard laughing with someone on his phone. His shoulders were relaxed, like a man who had nothing to hide. My throat felt tight. I swallowed hard. I murmured, forcing a little hum to keep from crying. Nights grew colder. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling while Mark's breathing slowed beside me. His phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. Once at 2 a.m., he slipped out of bed thinking I was asleep. I watched his silhouette in the dim light as he grabbed his jacket and left. The door clicked shut. Buddy whined. My stomach twisted. Tears slid into my hair. My fists clenched the sheets, but I still held on to hope. We had built a life. We had vows. People go through rough patches, right? The next morning, Mark brought me coffee in bed. He smiled, eyes warm, voice gentle. "We'll be okay," he whispered. I nodded, pressing the cup to my lips to hide my trembling. My reflection wavered in the dark liquid. I wanted to believe him. I really did. Then came the day everything shattered. But that part, the betrayal, is another chapter. For now, what I remember most about our before is how normal it all seemed. The porch swing creaked. Buddy wagged his tail. My husband smiled. And somewhere behind that smile, a secret grew, sharp as broken glass. The night I found out the truth was a Thursday. The rain fell hard on Tacoma streets, streaking the windows of my car as I sat outside the station. Mark had told me he was working late again, going over case files with a colleague. His voice on the phone was flat, clipped like a man reading a script. Something inside me, a soft, stubborn voice, told me to see for myself. I parked across the street, engine off. My hands were cold on the steering wheel. Tuck, tuck, tuck! The The wipers made a slow rhythm, like a heartbeat I couldn't calm. I leaned forward, squinting through the rain. The station's side door opened, spilling light onto the wet pavement. Mark stepped out. His uniform jacket was open, his hair damp from the rain. Beside him was Officer Kelly, tall, blonde, her badge catching the light. She laughed at something he said, then touched his arm. My stomach lurched. They didn't walk like co-workers leaving a shift. They walked like lovers leaving a secret. Their shoulders brushed. Mark's hand hovered at her back, then landed there, fingers spread. I felt heat rise up my neck. My nails dug into the steering wheel. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. A sound slipped out. Low and shaky. Buddy in the back seat whined softly. He could feel me shaking. They crossed to a dark sedan parked under a tree. Mark opened the door for her, glancing over his shoulder. For a moment, his face turned toward me, though I knew he couldn't see through the rain. His expression was relaxed, even tender. He touched Kelly's cheek. She smiled, lips parting. My heart pounded so hard it blurred my vision. They climbed inside and drove off. I followed. My fingers trembled on the ignition. The rain kept falling, drumming the roof. I stayed 2 cars back as they turned down quiet streets lined with closed shops. Finally, they pulled up to a small motel with a flickering neon sign. Evergreen Inn, vacancy. My breath caught. My chest felt tight like iron bands. I watched Mark step out, take Kelly's hand, and walk inside. He didn't even look around. He felt safe, sure. He thought I was home. I sat there for a long time, the rain blurring everything. Tears rolled hot down my cheeks, mixing with sweat. My fists beat once against the steering wheel. The sound came from deep inside, a kind of moan I couldn't stop. My whole body shook. Buddy pressed his head against my arm, whining. I gripped his fur, grounding myself. When I finally drove away, the streets were empty. The city lights looked cold. My reflection in the windshield was pale, eyes wide and hollow. I whispered to myself, "It's real. It's real," my voice cracked. At home, I stumbled into the bathroom and stared at the mirror. Mascara streaked my cheeks. My lips were white. I pressed my palms to the sink and bent forward, breathing hard. My stomach churned. I wanted to scream, to smash the glass. Instead, I slid down to the floor, knees to my chest. Buddy curled beside me. Tears dripped onto his fur. The next morning, Mark came home at dawn, hair damp, uniform wrinkled. He smelled of cheap soap and perfume. "Hey," he said softly, like nothing was wrong. "I'm beat." He moved to kiss my cheek. I stepped back. My hands shook, but I kept my voice steady. "Long night?" I asked. He blinked. "Yeah, paperwork." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting away. For the first time I saw it clearly. The lie under his skin. My chest burned. I didn't confront him right then. My body felt numb, but my mind was already moving. In my classroom later that day, while my students worked on math problems, I sat at my desk staring at a blank paper. My pen scratched out words without me thinking. Lawyer, evidence, settlement. The letters looked jagged. My heart hurt, but under the hurt, something else flickered. A spark. Over the next few weeks, I gathered proof. Phone records, receipts, photos. I hired a private investigator with the money from my small savings. Each new piece of evidence felt like a stone in my pocket, heavy but solid. At night, while Mark slept, I scrolled through the investigator's updates. Pictures of Mark and Kelly at restaurants, at the motel, even in uniform holding hands near his patrol car. My throat would close, but I forced myself to keep looking. My fists tightened. My eyes burned. One night, Mark came home late again. He tried to slip into bed. I turned to face him, my voice low but sharp. "Do you love her?" His body stiffened. His jaw clenched. "What?" he said, too loud. I repeated, "Do you love her?" My hands shook under the blanket. He looked at me, eyes dark, mouth opening then closing. "It's complicated," he muttered. That was all. He rolled over, turning his back to me. I stared at the ceiling. Tears slid into my hair. Buddy shifted at my feet. A shaky breath escaped me. Something inside me hardened. The next day, I called Laura. My voice was calm, almost flat. "He's cheating," I said. She gasped. "Rachel, oh my God." I told her everything. She wanted me to leave him at once. But I wasn't ready to run. Not yet. I wanted justice. I wanted him to face what he had done. My hands clenched the phone. My voice turned cold. "He's going to pay," I said. From then on, every smile I gave Mark was a mask. Every dinner we ate together was a performance. Inside, I was building a case. I started seeing a lawyer named Denise, a sharp woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She listened, took notes, and nodded. "With this evidence," she said softly, "we can take him to court. Given his salary and reputation, a settlement could be significant." She looked me in the eye. "You're stronger than you think." Walking out of her office that day, the winter wind hit my face. I pulled my coat tighter. My reflection in the glass door looked different, still pale, but my eyes steadier. I took a deep breath. "He will pay," I whispered. My lips curled into a small, hard smile. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. After the betrayal, life felt like a house struck by a storm. My world leaned to one side and would not right itself. The bright rooms of our home turned dim. The porch swing creaked too loudly. Buddy barked at shadows. Every small sound made my heart race. At school, I smiled for the kids. I taught multiplication and reading, and I graded spelling tests. I answered questions with calm, patient voice. But when the bell rang and the room emptied, I would sit at my desk and let my head fall into my hands. My eyes were puffy. My hair stuck to my face. I had trouble focusing. I forgot lesson plans. Once I called a parent by the wrong name in a conference. She looked at me with confusion and pity. I forced a smile. I'm fine, I lied. Mark did not make it easier. He acted normal in public. On the street, he nodded to neighbors, spoke in a clear voice, and put his hand on my back like nothing had happened. At home, he was colder. Sometimes he left without a word. His coat would hang on the peg, his uniform still warm. He moved like a ghost. When he did stay, the air between us felt sharp. We ate in silence. He read the paper. I watched him through the steam rising from my tea. My face would tighten with every small movement he made. One night he came home late, smelling of cheap perfume again. I sat on the couch, hands folded. "Where were you?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Shift ran long." He did not meet my eyes. "You always have excuses," I said. My voice cracked. "You have a choice, Mark. Choose." He blinked, closed his eyes, and then, without warning, shouted, "You're hysterical!" His hands flew up. Buddy jumped and yelped. My mouth fell open. I felt a hot wave of shame and anger. I made a sound, part sob, part laugh. My cheeks burned. After that, things got worse. Word spread at the station. People whispered. Some colleagues avoided me in the grocery store. I felt eyes on me when I walked into small businesses. Mark's friends called less. Laura tried to cheer me up, but there were gaps in our conversations. When I talked about evidence or the lawyer, people shifted uncomfortably. "These things happen," someone would say. "You'll get through it." Their words felt thin. I wanted someone to say, "He's a coward. He hurt you. He'll pay." Money tightened. Mark refused to let me access our joint account. He said it was for bills. I watched the numbers shrink on my phone. I had taken a small savings class, put aside money for an emergency. It was small, but it kept me breathing. Denise, the lawyer, explained fees and retainer costs. I counted coins and negotiated with myself. I stopped buying new clothes. I ate simple meals. The refrigerator grew sparse. At night, I pulled an old sweater over my knees and sat on the floor of the kitchen. The tile was cold. Buddy leaned into me like a small, warm anchor. The community that once cheered for me began to take sides. At PTA meetings, people gave me polite nods. At the grocery store, someone would say, "Hope things get better," then hurry away. The isolation felt worse than any sting. Loneliness sat heavy behind my ribs. I would drive aimlessly at midnight, the radio playing songs I used to like. The city lights blurred through tears. I kept thinking of the motel sign, flickering, red, like a scar burned into my eyes. But the worst pain was the quiet when I came home alone. I'd set the table for two, then eat with my hands, staring at the empty chair. I would find Mark's old shirts folded in the closet and bury my face in them, breathing in the memory of him. Then the anger would rise like bile. I would throw the shirt across the room and pace until my calves ached. My fist hit the wall once. My knuckles throbbed. "Huh!" I shouted into the empty house. Buddy stared at me, head tilted, confused. The sound left the back of my throat like a stone. Denise kept pushing me to be smart. "Keep records," she said. "Document every interaction." I did. I wrote down times, dates, and quotes. I saved messages and receipts. I backed everything up on a thumb drive. I learned to wear a mask of calm. When friends asked how I was, I said, "I'm working through it." It felt like speaking in a foreign language. But each time I wrote down a fact, I felt a little steadier. Each clear note was a nail in the frame of what I would build. My body changed. I lost weight. My hands shook less, but my eyes grew sharper. My shoulders pulled back without me noticing. I cut my hair short, a practical chop, and it made my face look harder. I stopped apologizing for my needs. When Mark tried to manipulate me with sweet words, I would look at him for a long beat and say nothing. A slow, hard calm settled on me like armor. One night, after a long day of work and paperwork, I caught Mark listening to Kelly on the phone at the kitchen table. He laughed softly, leaning forward. I stood in the doorway. The sight made my stomach drop and my blood boil at once. He looked up, and for a second his expression cracked. Then he smoothed it, like a man rearranging a picture on a wall. "We need to be careful," he told her. "My wife is getting suspicious." He sounded like a child trying to cover mischief. I felt rage like heat under my skin. I pressed my palms into the doorframe until they hurt. Buddy whined. I threw my voice into a sharp sound, a mix of fury and fear. That moment forced my hand. I could not sit and wait while he laughed with her. I could not let whispers and glances chip away at my life. I called Denise and told her everything I had. Denise's jaw set. We'll file for separation and begin the settlement discussions, she said. Given his job and the betrayal with an on-duty officer, we can make a strong claim. Her voice was steady. It will be messy. It may take time. But you have proof. Time felt heavy. I feared being branded as the woman who could not keep her marriage together. I feared the pitying looks. But I also felt a glimmer of control. I had once believed in a future with Mark. He took that from me. He would not take my dignity too. At night, I sat in the dark and whispered plans to Buddy. We'll be okay, I said, though I was not sure. I touched the thumb drive with all the pictures and messages. It was small and cold. My hands trembled. I held it like a talisman. I breathed out, low and steady. The path ahead looked rocky. But for the first time in months, I could see the road forward. It had twists and thorns. But it was mine to walk. I woke up one morning before dawn and realized I wasn't crying anymore. I was angry, yes, hurt, but the sobbing had stopped. In its place was a clear, sharp feeling, like the air after a storm. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded, eyes steady. Outside, the sky was still dark. Buddy lay at my feet, his head on his paws. It's time, I whispered. My voice sounded different, low, calm, deliberate. For the first time in months, my shoulders didn't sag. That day, I drove to Denise's office with the thumb drive in my coat pocket. The sky over Tacoma was gray, but the air was crisp. Inside, Denise spread the evidence across her desk. Photos, call logs, receipts. Her silver hair glinted under the lamp. She tapped the papers with a pen. This is strong, she said. We'll file for divorce and demand a large settlement. Because he's a public servant and she's a fellow officer, this will be a scandal. She looked up at me. Are you ready for that? My jaw tightened. Yes, I said. My hands didn't shake. We began drafting documents. Denise explained each step in simple terms. This is a petition for dissolution, she said. This is a request for discovery. This is the proposed settlement. I nodded, signing where she pointed. Each signature felt like a nail sealing a coffin. I left her office feeling taller, like my spine had grown an inch. The winter wind hit my face. I pulled my coat tight and walked to my car without looking down. At school, I stopped hiding. When colleagues asked how I was, I said, I'm divorcing Mark. Their eyebrows shot up. He's been cheating with a fellow officer. We're going to court. My voice was steady. Some gasped. Some whispered. A few patted my arm. But something changed in their eyes. Not pity, respect. My students noticed too. Ms. Carter, one said shyly, you look stronger. I smiled for real, a small, soft smile. Thank you, I said. I also began taking care of my body. I went for runs along the waterfront before school, the cold air burning my lungs. My hair grew back into a neat bob. My cheeks flushed with color. In the mirror, I saw a woman I almost recognized. Not the old Rachel, but a new version. My eyes were clear. My posture was straight. My jawline was firm. Even Buddy seemed to sense the change. He trotted beside me with his tail high. Mark, on the other hand, began to fray. When he got the divorce papers, he slammed the door so hard the frame shook. You're ruining my career, he shouted, his face red. Veins stood out in his neck. You did that yourself, I said quietly. My hands were steady on the counter. He stepped closer, his jaw clenched. For a heartbeat, the air felt dangerous. Buddy growled low. I lifted my chin and met his eyes. Back away, I said. My voice was sharp as a blade. Mark blinked, then stepped back. He grabbed his jacket and stormed out, the door rattling behind him. My heart raced, but I didn't move until his car pulled away. The investigation Denise had predicted started within weeks. Internal Affairs questioned Kelly. Local news sniffed around. Headlines appeared online. Police sergeant in affair scandal. My phone buzzed with messages. Some were cruel, some sympathetic. I ignored them. I kept jogging, kept teaching, kept documenting. Denise prepared me for depositions. Answer simply, she coached. Look at the lawyer, not at him. Breathe. I practiced in front of the mirror, shoulders back, voice firm. Yes? No? That is correct. Each word tasted like steel. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of tea, reviewing papers. Buddy lay at my feet. I would hum softly, a low mm-hmm that calmed me. I pictured the courtroom, the judge, the gavel, Mark's face. I imagined myself standing tall, not shrinking. I imagined the moment of victory. The thought didn't make me smile. It made me breathe easier. I also started to rebuild small joys. I went to the library, checked out novels. I joined a weekend hiking group. I laughed with Laura over coffee, real laughter that rose from my chest. She squeezed my hand. You're coming back, she said. No, I replied softly. I'm going forward. My eyes held hers. She nodded. One evening, Mark showed up unannounced. He stood on the porch, eyes bloodshot, hair uncombed. We can work this out, he said, his voice pleading. Don't do this. Don't ruin me. I looked at him through the screen door. His shoulders sagged. He wasn't the man who used to smile at me over pancakes. He wasn't even the man who had smirked at Kelly outside the station. He looked small. I opened the door a crack. "You did this to yourself," I said. My voice was low but steady. "I'm done." I closed the door. His fist hit the frame once. Then silence. His footsteps retreated down the porch. I leaned against the door, my breath shaking. Tears welled in my eyes but didn't fall. My lips pressed together. "Hun," I exhaled slowly. Buddy licked my hand. I knelt, hugging him. "Almost there," I whispered. The court date was set for early spring. Denise estimated we could demand $300,000 in a settlement, damages, attorney fees, and compensation for marital misconduct. The number sounded huge, but it wasn't about money. It was about accountability. It was about standing up in public and saying, you hurt me, and there are consequences. In the weeks leading up to the hearing, I rehearsed my statement. I wrote it in plain, direct words. "My name is Rachel Carter. My husband, Mark Carter, a police sergeant, engaged in a prolonged affair with Officer Kelly Smith while on duty. This caused emotional distress, financial strain, and public humiliation. I seek fair compensation and a clean break." I practiced reading it aloud, my voice low and clear. Sometimes I would slam my hand softly on the table to mimic the gavel. Buddy would perk his ears. I'd smile faintly. Each practice made me stronger. My hands stopped trembling. My voice no longer cracked. My back stayed straight even when I imagined Mark glaring at me. At night, as I turned off the lamp, I whispered, "You're ready." My own voice soothed me. The morning of the hearing, I laid out my clothes carefully. A simple navy dress, low heels, a silver necklace my mother had given me. I braided my hair back from my face. In the mirror, I saw a woman who had walked through fire and come out standing. My eyes met my reflection. "This is the day," I said softly. My jaw set. My shoulders squared. Buddy wagged his tail as if he knew. We left the house together. The air smelled like wet earth and new beginnings. The courthouse loomed ahead, tall and glassy. I held my papers tight, my fingers firm. Each step up the stairs felt like a heartbeat. My chest rose and fell. I made a low sound, half a hum, half a sigh, steadying myself. The doors opened. Light spilled out. It was time to finish this. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and paper. My heels clicked on the floor as I walked down the hall toward the courtroom. Each step echoed in my chest. Thud, thud, thud. My palms were dry now. The trembling had stopped. Buddy couldn't come inside, but Laura sat with him outside on the steps. I glanced back through the glass doors. She gave me a thumbs up. I nodded once and pushed the door open. Inside, the ceiling rose high. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly. At the front, the judge sat on the bench, glasses low on his nose, gavel resting on a block. On one side of the room, Denise laid out our folders. On the other, Mark sat with his lawyer. His uniform was replaced by a suit, but the badge still gleamed on the table beside him. Kelly sat a row behind him, arms crossed, lips tight, eyes flicking around nervously. My stomach tightened, but my face stayed calm. The bailiff called the case. "Carter versus Carter," he said. "Petition for dissolution and damages." His voice echoed off the walls. People shifted on the benches. The judge raised his eyes. "Ready to proceed?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Denise said. Her voice was crisp. She gestured for me to step forward. I stood, smoothing my navy dress. My legs felt steady, like I had roots in the floor. My jaw was set, but my lips didn't tremble. I took a slow breath. A soft hum slipped from me, grounding me. Then I began to speak. "My name is Rachel Carter," I said, my voice low but clear. "I was married to Mark Carter for 7 years. While serving as a police sergeant, he engaged in an ongoing affair with Officer Kelly Smith, also on duty. This affair caused me severe emotional distress, financial loss, and public humiliation. Today I asked the court for a fair settlement and a clean break." Denise handed exhibits to the clerk. Photos of Mark and Kelly at the motel, receipts, phone logs. My thumb drive had become a mountain of evidence. The judge flipped through the pages, his eyebrows rising slightly. Mark shifted in his chair. His jaw clenched. A muscle twitched near his eye. Kelly looked down at her hands, picking at her cuticle. Mark's lawyer stood. He tried to paint me as vindictive. He said, "My client has already suffered enough in the press." He said, "This is a private matter." He said, "Sergeant Carter remains a respected officer." But his voice lacked heat. The evidence was too strong. Denise rose slowly, her silver hair catching the light. "Your Honor," she said, "this is not simply a private matter. This is a case of marital misconduct involving public resources and a breach of duty. My client endured months of deception and humiliation. She deserves compensation that reflects the harm done." She glanced at me, then at the judge. "We request a settlement of $300,000. The number hung in the air like a bell. Murmurs rippled through the benches. Mark's face went red. He gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "This is outrageous," he muttered. The judge raised a hand. "Order," he said calmly. Then came the cross-examination. Denise asked me gentle questions. How I found out, how it affected my life. I answered simply. I couldn't sleep. I lost weight. I spent my savings on legal help. Each answer was a stone laid in a path toward justice. Mark's lawyer tried to rattle me. You followed him, he asked. You took photographs? Yes, I said. Because he was lying. My voice stayed steady. My eyes stayed on him, not on Mark. When it was Mark's turn to speak, he stood, buttoning his jacket. His hands trembled slightly. He started with an apology. I never meant to hurt her. But his voice cracked. He tried to blame stress, long hours, the danger of police work. He glanced at Kelly. She looked away. I watched him, my face neutral. Inside, a small part of me remembered the man who used to smile at me over pancakes. But the larger part remembered the motel sign flickering red in the rain. The judge leaned forward. Sergeant Carter, he said, you took an oath to serve and protect. That oath extends to integrity in your personal conduct, especially with colleagues. The evidence shows a serious breach of trust. He tapped the gavel softly. This court finds in favor of the petitioner. Settlement is ordered in the amount of $300,000, payable within 90 days. For a moment, silence filled the room. Mark's shoulders slumped. His lawyer put a hand on his arm, but he shook it off. Kelly stared at the floor. Denise's lips pressed into a thin smile. I closed my eyes for one beat, then opened them. A breath left my body. Half sigh, half release. My hands loosened on the papers. My heart beat steady. I didn't smile. I simply stood taller. The judge banged the gavel once. Court is adjourned. People rose. The bailiff called for order. Mark didn't look at me as he gathered his things. He moved quickly toward the door, shoulders hunched. Kelly followed at a distance, her eyes wide. Denise touched my arm. You did it, she said softly. You were perfect. I turned, scanning the benches. Laura was at the back, tears in her eyes, a small, proud smile on her lips. She mouthed, "You're free." I nodded. My throat felt thick, but my eyes were dry. My fingers found the edge of the table and curled loosely, not in fists this time, but in a gentle hold. Outside the courtroom, the light felt brighter. The glass doors gleamed. Buddy leapt up when he saw me, tail wagging. I knelt, burying my face in his fur. His warmth seeped into my hands. We're okay, I whispered. We're okay. My lips trembled, then steadied. Laura put a hand on my shoulder. Denise gave a small nod and walked off to file papers. I straightened and took a slow breath. The courthouse behind me buzzed with other cases, other lives. But for me, the fight was over. My face softened. My jaw unclenched. My shoulders lowered. I stepped out onto the top stair, the cool air brushing my skin. The sky had cleared. For the first time in months, I felt the sun on my face without flinching. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window of my small rental in Oak Park. It was the first morning in months I had woken up without that weight in my chest. No papers to file, no private eyes to pay, no lawyers to call. Just the sound of Buddy's paws clicking on the hardwood floor and the smell of fresh coffee drifting up from the pot. I stood at the counter in sweatpants and a soft hoodie, both hands wrapped around a mug. My nails were bare now, my face free of makeup. In the reflection of the window, I saw my own face, tired but different. Softer around the eyes. The tightness in my jaw was gone. I took a long sip. A low hum escaped my throat. It tasted like peace. Laura came in from the porch holding a manila envelope. "Certified," she said, waving it. From the court. She dropped it on the table and poured herself coffee. "You want me to open it?" she asked. I laughed quietly. "I already know what it says," I said. "But go ahead." She slid her finger under the flap and pulled out the check. $300,000. The numbers printed crisp in black ink. She laid it flat between us. We stared at it for a moment. My stomach flipped, but not from fear. From relief. From possibility. I touched the paper lightly with one fingertip. "That's the price of my freedom," I murmured. Laura's eyes softened. "No," she said. "That's the price of what he did. Your freedom was always yours." I looked up at her and smiled. A real smile this time, not the tight one I had been wearing like armor for months. My shoulders eased down. My eyes filled with a warm sting, but the tears didn't fall. They weren't sad tears anymore. They were just there. Buddy barked once, wagging his tail. I crouched and rubbed his head. "We're moving on, boy," I whispered. "We're really moving on." The next weeks passed in a blur of change. I left the old house and found a little craftsman bungalow 2 blocks from Lake Michigan. Blue shutters, a tiny garden out front. It wasn't big, but it was mine. I painted the living room walls a pale yellow, opened all the windows, and let the air roll in off the lake. Each night I slept with the curtains open, watching the sky shift from navy to gray to pink in the mornings. I went back to work part-time at the community college, teaching writing classes. At first my voice trembled in the classroom, but soon it steadied. I found myself laughing with my students, leaning on the podium, telling stories about resilience and courage without even realizing it. Their faces brightened. My own did too. Denise stopped by one afternoon with a stack of legal papers. "All finalized," she said, smiling. She had left her blazer in the car and wore a soft cardigan. Without the courtroom around her, she looked like someone's aunt. We sat on the porch sipping iced tea. "You handled yourself with grace," she told me. "Not everyone does." Her words sank in like sun on my skin. I felt a warmth I hadn't felt since before everything broke. Sometimes, at night, the memories still came. The motel sign glowing, Mark's voice lying into the phone, my own hands shaking. But now when they came, I breathed through them. My fists no longer clenched. My jaw no longer locked. I would stroke Buddy's fur and whisper, and softly until the images faded. It wasn't forgetting. It was moving forward. One Saturday morning, I went for a run along the lakefront. The air was crisp. Kids laughed on the playground. A man played saxophone under a tree. The notes curled up like smoke. As I jogged, I felt my lungs open. My arms pumped, my feet struck the path, my heart beat strong. Sweat ran down my neck, but I smiled, teeth showing to the wind. My body, once curled in grief, was opening again. At the far end of the path, I slowed to a walk. A young couple passed by holding hands. The girl laughed, her head thrown back. For a flash, I saw myself years ago. Pancakes, a shared apartment, a future imagined. But instead of pain, a calm acceptance spread through me. People choose. People betray. People also heal. I sat on a bench facing the water. Buddy hopped up beside me. I scratched behind his ear. "We're okay," I said softly. "We're really okay." He leaned against me, warm and solid. My eyes followed a boat sliding across the horizon. It left a thin wake that slowly smoothed out behind it until the water was still again. Months later, Mark called once. His number flashed on my phone. I stared at it. My thumb hovered, then I pressed decline. No anger. No shaking. Just a quiet decision. The past had no claim on my future anymore. Kelly never reached out. I heard through a mutual friend that she transferred to another department. I wished her nothing, good or bad. That chapter was closed. On the 1-year anniversary of the court case, Laura and I sat on the porch with glasses of wine. The sun dipped low, painting the lake gold. "You know," she said, "you're a completely different person than the one who walked into my office." She grinned. "You even stand taller," I laughed, leaning back. "Feels like I can breathe again." I touched the base of my throat. "Like the air goes all the way down now." She raised her glass. "To breathing," she said. We clinked glasses. The sound rang clear in the evening air. I watched the sky shift to purple. For the first time in a long time, I felt the future stretching out before me, not as a threat, but as a blank canvas. My lips curved upward. My eyes softened. My heart slowed. I whispered, almost to myself, "Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about getting your life back." Buddy barked once, as if in agreement. I smiled at him. "And we've got ours back." That night, after Laura left, I stood at the open window of my bedroom. The lake breeze carried the scent of water and pine. My reflection in the glass looked back at me, older, stronger, still beautiful. Not defined by betrayal, but by survival. I pressed my palm to the window, fingers spread. My heart beat steady. My breathing was slow. A small tear slid down my cheek, not from sorrow, but from release. I whispered one last time, "It's over." Then I turned off the light, crawled into bed, and slept deeply.